Okay, so we're going to do a piece on Parshas Chayei Sorah from the Nesivos Shalom, as we've been doing. I chose a shorter piece this week. We'll do, I think, more of it. Again, I'm trying, at least at this point, to follow the Nesivos Shalom's derech, pieces that show his derech, and he tries to create several questions and then to give a theme that sort of explains what's going on in the parsha and how he sees the development of the parsha. So we spoke last week a lot about Avram's chesed, and 2 weeks ago we spoke about Avram's chesed, and he's going to continue with that. But he starts off with some more well-known questions. Starts off Vayu. I didn't underline all the paragraphs because the first two paragraphs we're going to do the whole paragraphs, and then we'll skip around a little bit. But Vayu Chayei Sorah Me'ah Shanim V'Ashrim Shana V'Sheva Shanim Shnei Chayei Sorah. So this parsha opens with us being told how long Sarah lived. She lived 127 years. Upirish Rashi says Shnei Chayei Sorah Kulan Shavin L'Tova. Right, a well-known Rashi also that all of Sarah's years were equally good. All of Sarah's years were equally good. Uvesefer Irin Kadishin, Merebi HaKadosh Merizhin. The Rizhin Rebbe says, Hiksha, and this question also I'm sure you've heard, but, this one maybe less popular than the next one. Al Oimre Veyu, Shehu Miloshan Veihi, Shamru Chazal, Al Zed Haveloshan Tsar. Chazal tell us, although the Gemara is not so clear, but the Gemara tells us for sure that Vaihi Bimei is Lashon Tsar, but even the Lashon Vaihi, when we have the Lashon of Vaihi, it's usually a language of something negative happening. The Gemara does say that Vaihi doesn't have to necessarily mean negative, doesn't have to necessarily mean something painful. Vaihi Bimei certainly does, the Gemara in Megillah, but Vaihi also is an indication of Lashon Tsar. So his question is, the Rishon's question is, that if the pasuk here says Vayu Chayei Sorah, that the days of Chayei Sorah, which is a lashon of Vayihi, which is a lashon of Tsar, if it's a lashon of Tsar, how does Rashi say that all of her years were good? And then he asks the more famous, which is really part of the same question, Uvechlal tzarich bir. In general, we need to understand, it needs explanation. Hadukulam shavin l'tova. How could you say about Sarah's life that they were all good years? Hare kol chayei shel Sarah hayu meleim tsar v'yisurim. She had a difficult life. Right? Chazal tell us that all of Avram's 10 Nisyonis Sarah went through as well. They were partners in everything. She went through the Asar Nisyonis to some degree, maybe not exactly like Avram went through them, but she went through them as well. And we know the difficulties. She was. Chazal tell us that the reason why she had such a reaction to the news about Yitzchak was because she was incapable of having children. Biologically, she was incapable of having children. She didn't have a womb. She had a difficult life. She never thought there was any chance of her having children. She had the stories with Hagar. She was taken captive by Paroi. She was being taken captive by Avimelech. Nobody would say that Sarah had an easy life. She was traveling with her husband. She experienced the famine. Lot was her nephew when Avram went to war with the kings to save Lot. It was not, nobody would consider that to have been an easy life. So the question is, how is that Rashi tells us that they were all equally good? Maybe the last 37 years before she died, when she had Yitzchak, maybe those were good. Maybe there were moments of good in between, but it's hard to say that she had a very good life. Is there any other character in Tanakh? I shouldn't use the word character, that's a little bit denigrating. Is there any other personality in Tanakh that we have this kind of language where we have Rashi saying that they were all equally good? Right? And we know all the Mefarshim on Rashi explain that she was a tzaddik, and just like when she was 100, she was 20, and when she was 20, she was like 7. There were other tzaddikim who lived in Klal Yisrael's history. We never have this kind of statement about any of them. This is not said about any other tzaddik or tzaddikis. We don't have this kind of lashon. And it's interesting, why specifically Sarah? It's hard to say that Sarah was the only one who lived a consistent life her whole life. He says, similarly, a question is, later on in the parsha it says, Avram was old with days, and Hashem blessed Avram with everything. Bakol, with everything is a pretty comprehensive statement. This is the epitome. This is the epitome of any kind of bracha. He had everything. He had. I don't know if this thing. I don't want it to not record again. I'm sorry. I'm just checking. Yeah, it's still recording. Okay, sorry. So last week it stopped recording on me, and I had to re-record it. So just if I would check. Okay. This language that Hashem gave him everything, we don't find by any other tzaddik in Jewish history either. So what's going on here? There's something obviously that the Torah is trying to impart to us with all of this. Okay, so those are the questions that he's going to answer. But as he generally does, we're gonna talk about the life of Avram and Sarah, and then come back to these questions. V'yesh leimer ha'inyan. So therefore, we can explain. Just the questions we asked was Rashi said that all of Sarah's years were good. The lashon of the pasuk indicates that there was tsar. How can we call them good if there was tsar? And why specifically by Sarah do we have this kind of language, and why specifically by Avram do we have the bracha of Bakal? So now says the Rabbi on page Kuf Lamed Aleph on the copies there. I combined some pages to make it less trees sacrificing their lives. V'yesh lemer inyan. Dehine ksiv in the pasuk in Tehillim says Ki amarti olam chesed yibana, which we discussed last week. That pasuk that Hashem built the world on a foundation of chesed. Hainu shebinyan ha'olam oimid kuli al midas chesed. The entire structure of the earth is built on chesed. Chesed is the foundation of the world. The imkain reishis olam hatikin huschol me Avram Avinu. Therefore, the world of Tikkun, going up until Avram, from the time of Adam till the time of Avram, we saw a degeneration in the world. We saw the world failing further and further. We saw the world falling apart, right till Noach for sure. But even after Noach repopulates the earth, we see that the world getting worse and worse every year. And Avram Avinu is the first one to come around to start to fix the world. Even tzaddikim that we had before Avram Avinu were trying to just hold things, prevent things from getting worse. But we don't see them fixing the world. Avram Avinu begins this process of trying to fix the world to some degree. The reason why this is Avram is if the world was created based on chesed, and Avram Avinu embodies the midah of chesed. Avram Avinu is always our exemplar of chesed. So Avram Avinu is the one who can fix the world, because he's the one who's tuned in to what makes the world tick. Ki amarti olam chesed yibanu. V'zehu kol inyan parshas elu. That is, and if you've heard these you've learned with us the last 2 weeks, you see this from Lech Lecha to Vayera to Chayei Sorah. There's a major focus on the elements of Chesed. Parshi Yosef shel Avram Avinu. These are the parshas of Avram Avinu. Lamdenu eich shal yidei Chesed shel hischel binyan olam hatikin. How he started to work on the world of correction, of correcting the world. Va'inyan hamiyuchad shel midas haChesed. What's the unique thing about Chesed? Hu kamay dechsiv Chesed kel kol hayom. There's an element of Chesed that Hashem is doing Chesed all day. Hashem, Chesed Kel Kolayim, Hashem is busy with Chesed all day. That's also Pasuk in Tehillim. I looked it up at Nun Bey's Pasuk Gimel. Uchamayim Maran HaKadosh Mikubrin. He quotes the Kubriner, who we discussed the first week when we gave the introduction, was one of the Rebbeim of the first Slaughter Rebbe Zal. Shebachol Yom V'Yom Mechuyev Yehudi Lasis Ma'aseh Chesed. Right, this is a concept you might have heard by certain Chassidim. This is very fundamental, that a person has to find a way to do a Chesed every day. You have to do some sort of Chesed every day. A person should not go through a single day without doing some kind of chesed. That's a very strong language. But he says that a day on which a Jew did not do chesed, some kind of chesed, does not count as a day of his life. It does not count as a day of his life. The Shlach Kodesh writes similarly. These psukim that we said that the world is founded on chesed, and Hashem is engaged with chesed all the time. The chesed that comes from Shemayim, that we all daven for every day, we all need every day, comes because we do chesed down here. By virtue of the fact that a Jew does chesed, that draws more chesed down from Shemayim. A person has to look for ways to do chesed for his friend or for somebody every day. Begufay, b'monay, b'nafshay, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily writing a check. It could be something very simple as saying good morning to somebody who needs to hear a good morning, right? But something with his body, with his money, with his soul. To learn something with somebody. Or somebody who's having a bad day, to give him a little bit of chizuk. By doing this chesed, mashpiyam alav chesed min hashamayim. He's mashpia chesed in his life and in the life of the Jewish people and in the world. He brings down chesed. If you think of chesed almost like a faucet. By doing chesed, you're turning the faucet that allows chesed to flow into the world. This is unique about chesed than all the other midas. Every other midah has times when you have to use it, right? So when a person feels that a certain taiva is overcoming him, so he has to tap into the midah of yira. But if he's not facing that at that moment, he doesn't have to tap into Yira. And every midah is like that. Not every midah has to be used specifically every day. It has to be used when it's needed. But sometimes a person maybe goes a few days and he doesn't need to tap into certain midahs. Chesed is the only one where we have these statements that you have to engage in chesed every day. You can't have a day go by without chesed. Because we know the concept that Hashem is our shadow. So whatever we do, Hashem responds in kind. Midah connected midah, other concepts like that. When a person does chesed, so he brings chesed down to the world for himself and for others. So you might say, okay, maybe I don't need chesed today. So he deals with that. He says, you need Hashem's chesed every day. Each of us needs Hashem's chesed every day. We wouldn't survive a single day without Hashem's chesed. Hashem gives us life. Hashem gives us everything we have is from Hashem's chesed. So we need chesed every day. If we need chesed every day, we need to be engaged with chesed every day, because we said the way to open up the faucet of Hashem's chesed is by engaging in chesed. So if we need chesed, we have to engage in chesed every day. We wouldn't last even a single day if we didn't have Hashem's chesed. Therefore, since we need Hashem's chesed every day, we have to engage in chesed every single day. That's what the pasuk means when it says, I built the world on chesed. This is true for the world at large. That the world at large needs chesed. We see that. Even with what's going on in the world, we need tremendous chesed from Shemayim. And we need it in all of our personal lives. Every single person needs Hashem's chesed. Okay, so the next paragraph, he gives the examples of how much the Torah stresses chesed over the last two parshas, right? So he starts off with Avram at the beginning of Parshas Vayera. I'll just read a little bit of this paragraph outside, that Avram is sitting 3 days after he got a bris milah at 100 years old. So we imagine it was not very comfortable. He was in pain. It wasn't so comfortable. It was a hot day. Hashem made it on purpose, a hot day. And he sees people off in the distance. He runs to greet them because he wants to do chesed. So we see already Avram Avinu is not just somebody, and we'll see more about this on the next page. Avram Avinu is not somebody who just waits for opportunities of chesed to come to him, but he goes looking for them. He wants opportunities to do chesed. Right, and he was so hot, and as we discussed last week a lot, he gave up the ability to sit with Hashem, the right to sit with Hashem, his own spiritual growth, looking for opportunities to do chesed. Right, and then we also see this when it comes to arguing with Sodom. Right, we said that Sodom was the absolute opposite of what Avram Avinu was. They stood for everything that Avram felt was wrong with the world. They were the exact antithesis of Avram Avinu. And yet he davens for them. And yet he doesn't stop. He's looking to do chesed. Avram Avinu is the one who's always looking to do chesed. We see even this week's parsha opens with him trying to bury Sarah, which, as we know, Chazal call a chesed shel emes. We see that every story about Avram Avinu has some element of chesed there. Okay, so just keep that in mind for a minute, and then just read the last 3 lines of the paragraph. The Torah is telling us in all of these parshas, the last 3 parshas, as goydel haflogas hachesed shel Avram Avinu, that the greatness of Avram Avinu's chesed, shemizeh hischel libanes olam hatikkun. This is what he started to build the world of correcting what had been ruined over the past 20 generations, from the beginning of time till Avram Avinu. Okay, it says now when we come to this parsha, what happens after he buries Sarah? We open with the parsha of burying Sarah. Then we have the whole middle of the parsha deals with Eliezer going to look for a shidduch for Yitzchak. And we know, and I don't have to read you all the stories, but you can just see the line in the middle there that I underlined, that we see that when Eliezer goes, he introduces the idea that the Torah says about Eliezer. You see how chaviv the sichasan shel avdei avos, that even the regular speech of the servants of our fathers, how precious it was to Hashem. The whole parsha is basically Eliezer having the story and then retelling the story. Right? That's a big chunk of the parsha. How chashuv it is. And he says that if Eliezer is identified as Eliezer Eved Avram, he also was based on the midah of chesed. And how does he decide how he's going to find a girl for Yitzchak? The tests that he devises are all based on chesed. He wants to see whether she's going to give to drink to him, to the animals, right? She wants to see if he needs to find a girl who's a balas chesed for Yitzchak. All of the tests, he didn't ask like how learned she was or if she was a yarei shamayim. He wasn't looking for other characteristics, right? I don't know, the shidduch world today, there's a lot of things that people look for on the shidduch resume. Eliezer really was only looking for one thing. Is she a balas chesed? How far her chesed extends? He didn't ask any of the other questions, where her father davened, where she went to seminary. He didn't ask any of those questions, right? He only asked what was her level of chesed. And if you go down, he says ve'etzem hadavar. What's the explanation of this? Where I have it underlined. Why? Why? There's no other way to find a good Jewish girl than just based on her chesed. Chesed is very nice. It's a very nice element to look for. But there's other nice ways to find a good girl for his master's son. Eliezer knows that he's more than just finding a shidduch for his master's son. He needs to find the appropriate wife for Yitzchak who can bring Yaakov into the world. We know, just by way of introduction, Avram is the midah of chesed. Yitzchak was almost the opposite, obviously in a holy way, and obviously he had chesed also, but Yitzchak embodies yira. Yaakov is the balance of the two, right? I mean, without going into it, it's a whole different shir, but Avram Avinu's chesed, chesed without being tempered by yira creates a yishmael. Right, there was an element of Avram that had to be weeded out with Yishmael. Yitzchak's yira, without being tempered by love, by chesed, ends up in an Esav, who's a cruel murderer, right? So Yaakov is the one who finally balances it. So Eliezer understands that his mission is not just to make a shidduch. He's looking for the shidduch that's going to bear Yaakov Avinu, who's going to be the Bechir Sheba Avos, the choices of the Avos, who's going to have Mitosei Shlema. All 12 of his children are going to be tzaddikim. Yaakov Avinu is going to build Klal Yisrael. So Eliezer understands that it's not just a wife he's looking for Yitzchak. He needs the right partner to help Yitzchak build this next generation that's going to then create Klal Yisrael. So, let's his name Yaakov, Shemidosei Tiferes, Hakilelas Chesed and Gevura. That's the balance of Chesed and Gevura, of Ahava and Yira, of Chesed and Yira. Al Kain, Chipes Bazug Yitzchak, Shetia Kula Bimidas HaChesed. Therefore, he knows that he needs a girl who's going to be completely Chesed. Kivan Yitzchak Kula Gevura, because Yitzchak, as we explained, was the midah of Gevura of Yira. He needs he needs his counterpart. Yitzchak needs the chesed balance. Rivka tia kula chesed yuchal lotzes man Yaakov. They can have Yaakov. Maybe this is the source for opposites attract, right? This is the idea that Yitzchak and Rivka almost had to be opposites in order to bring about Yaakov Inu. Shutiferes hakalas chesed gevura. And therefore, look, just skip 2 lines. Hainushi mushlemes b'midas hachesed. She has to be perfect, complete in the midah of chesed. Right? And then he makes the point, he says, why is it that Eliezer tested her with giving to drink to camels? Why not bring other people? Avram had plenty of money. Avram was a very wealthy guy. There were probably other people who worked around the estate. Why did he take like a little entourage with him and see if she would give to drink all the people? Why specifically camels? So he quotes a Ber Mayim Chaim. He says, Alpima de'isa beber b'ayim chaim. On the next page, this is the underlined part. Shechesed v'rachim heim beis madregas. So we tend to use them interchangeably in davening. We talk about chesed and rachmim. But he says if you think about them from a academic perspective, chesed and rachmim are two different things, right? Even the way we translate them in English, you could start to see the difference. Chesed we translate as kindness, and rachmim is mercy. So he explains, rachamim is armal yedei hamakabel. Mercy is a reaction to the person. It's something that's inspired in me when I see the person who needs something, right? So if I see somebody who's down on his luck, I'm a human being, I have emotions, I have empathy, I feel that this person needs something, and I'm inspired to do something. It's very nice. It's a very important madrega, and Jews are identified as rachmanim. We're supposed to be merciful. That's beautiful. I see somebody who's suffering through something, or he's in pain. It touches my heart. It touches my heart. And I'm inspired to help this person. I see somebody, right? Let's take a simple example. You see somebody trying to cross the street with too many shopping bags. And there's discomfort. And so you're inspired right away to run over and to help, right? That's very good. It's a very good thing. It comes from a very good place. But it's a reaction to the fact that the person's in pain. I see somebody in pain that bothers me. That means as a good person, as a good human being, it bothers me, and I'm inspired to help. That's excellent. That's fantastic. But that's not the highest level of chesed. But that's lower than chesed. It's great, but it's lower than chesed. Because this person, the rachamim, he's inspired in reaction to somebody who needs something. Right? Halavai, we always noticed somebody near us in pain and always reacted. That would be amazing. But there's still a greater level. The ish chesed, the Avram Avinu, is not just looking to alleviate somebody's pain. He's looking for opportunities to put chesed out there in the world. He does it even if he sees nobody who needs anything. So you could be forgiven for thinking, everybody around me is doing well. Everybody I know of, I don't know of anybody who needs anything. So I could sit back and take the day off, right? Everybody seems to be okay. And even if I really inquire and I know everybody's is okay. So you could take the day off. Avram Avinu wouldn't take the day off. When he was sitting outside the tent talking to Hashem, there were no guests around. That's why Hashem made it so hot. There would be no guests walking by. But then Hashem saw, right, why did the Malachim come? Because Hashem saw that it was bothering Avram Avinu that he was doing. Why? So from a level of rachamim, that's fine. There's nobody here who needs to be fed right now. Then you don't have to go feed anybody. But Avram is bothered. I need to put chesed out into the world. I want the ability to do chesed for somebody. And if I don't have somebody who needs it, I need to go find somebody who I can do it for. Okay. That's why the parshas are filled with Avram's chesed. Not that he just happened to have the most opportunities to do chesed. No, he was always looking for places to do chesed. If he didn't know of anybody who needed chesed, he went looking for new places to do chesed. Right, when we were kids, we were taught that he had a tent with 4 doors and people walked by. But Chazal tell us that when people didn't walk by his tent, he went out to the main intersections to try to find people. Did you have something to eat? Do you need something? That was who Avram Avinu was, as the Ish Chesed. And that's what Eliezer was looking for in Rivka. That's what he was looking for as a mate for Yitzchak. He was looking for somebody who was not just a Baal Rachamim, but a Baal Chesed. Somebody who was looking for Chesed. And that's why he explains, he says that when you see somebody who just came in from a long journey, when Rivka saw Eliezer and wanted to give him something to drink, that made her a Rachamim. But he didn't know where her level of chesed was. When she starts feeding camels, and it's no coincidence that it's camels who don't really need water, she's looking for something to help. Look at the underlined lines. The person, the ish chesed, who has no opportunity to do chesed, he's pained by this. It bothers him. He can't handle it. How can I find other opportunities to do chesed? That was Avram Avinu. Skip down to the bottom. That's why he wanted to see if she would also offer. Remember, he didn't ask her for water. Eliezer in his test didn't ask her for water. Certainly didn't tell her that the camels need water. But she was looking, who else can I give water to? What else can I give water to? Even with animals, she felt that she wanted to give. That's who he says Hashem prepared for Yitzchak. So the last two paragraphs, we have a few minutes. We're going to read most of it because there's some amazing Yesodis here. It says, Val Pikala Amr, right? Second column on page Kuf Lamed Beis. Pikala Amr, Yesh Loimer. After everything we've said, remember, we asked these questions at the beginning of the Shir. Why did Hashem count 127 years of Sarah? Why is Avram and she's the only one where Rashi says a line like Shav and Latova, that all her years were equally good. We asked, were they really equally good? She had a difficult life. Why was Avram the only one said Bakol? He had everything. And then we took a little bit of a detour, and now he's going to bring it back. He says, Val Pikol Amr Yesh Lamer Amr Veyu Chayei Sorah. Shnei Chayei Sorah. Shapir's Rashi Klum Sham Latova. Rashi said they were all equally good. Shekshinu Sharei Avru Oleh Harbim Moed Tloes V'Yisurim. She went through a lot of difficulties. Sarah Menu did not have an easy life. She didn't have an easy life. V'Yesh Lamer Habir Al Pi Maimer Chazal. The Chazal tell us Tzadikim Tchilas and Yisurin V'Soifan Shalva. That Tzadikim, the beginning is difficult. They go through suffering. They go through difficulties. At the end, they have tranquility. They have tranquility. And the question is, what does the Medrash mean? Pirish, Tchilas and Yisurim Hemen Nisyonis Hachayim Ha'over Mal Tzadikim. These are the tests, right? We know Avram had Asara Nisyonis. He had 10 tests. The tests, the difficulties that a tzaddik goes through their life, that is the Tchilas on Yisurin. Shayisurin Gam Heim Bechlal Nisyonis Hachayim. Because when a person suffers, it's also our tests from Hashem. We don't understand it. The fact that we don't understand it is part of what makes it difficult, right? If a person knew exactly what the test was and what it would result in, it would make the tests a lot easier to get through. Now, not that they would necessarily be easy, but if a person knew you're going to go through this difficulty for 6 months and then you're going to have this at the end, it would make it a lot easier. But that would take away from the test element of it. Very often, the hardest part of the test is not knowing what's going on. Like, why am I going through this? That sometimes is the hardest part of the test. Avo soif and shalva, the end is tranquility. Shal yidei kol nisyonis, hayisurim ha'over maleim, hareim mis'alon misgadlan. That part of the nisyonis, besides what the nisyon proves about the person, besides what the difficulty, but what it also does is it changes the person. It makes the person grow, right? It has an effect on who that person is. We know that some of the most successful, influential people became that way because of the difficulties they had in their life, and then they were able to pay that forward to other people. That's part of what makes a person grow, right? A person who's born with the silver spoon in their mouth and never encounters any kind of difficulty and has that life that's completely easy. We don't have to look too far in world history that some of the royal families that raised their children, in bubbles, they didn't make the greatest leaders or rulers afterwards. Their fathers had been successful leaders because they themselves had gone through a lot to get to the point where they were able to lead other people and they were able to understand what people were going through. That's part of the nisyonis, is what creates who that person becomes afterwards. It says in the pasuk, "V'elekim nises Avram," that Hashem tested Avram. And Nasat l'Reyecha Nesivos Shalom. So the pasuk tells us that it was a Nesivos Shalom. You could translate either as a miracle to be publicized, or you could translate Nesivos Shalom is referring to like a ship, the mast on a ship, the flag on a ship that gets pulled up is a nes. Flag is called a nes lehisnoses, to be elevated. Shanisoyin shekadosh baruch hu noisein. This is, notice the word nisoyin, nes lehisnoses. Who nes lehisnoses nasan ulegadlin. It elevates you, it lifts you up. It's difficult at the time. And it could be very dark at that time. But then when a person comes through that and a person grows from it, it changes who he is. Like the flag on a ship, that it becomes elevated. By overcoming, every time a person goes through a challenge. And by the way, it doesn't have to be, Avraham Avinu was obviously, we're not on Avraham Avinu's level, but every little nisayon that a person has, something that doesn't go right, how he reacts to it. It could be something minor. You went to the bank, they told you they'd have the paperwork ready, and you end up sitting there for 45 minutes because they don't know what they're doing, right? Just how you react to that could be a nisayon. That could be a nisayon on our level. And that gets me to now be a better person, because even though that was an uncomfortable 45 minutes, and we're not wishing it on anybody, but the way I come through that informs who I am afterwards and changes who I am and makes me bigger and greater because I went through it the right way. Or the reverse. Very often the reverse, right? It's not just a timeline. He's saying that when the Medrash says that the beginning is Yisurin, is difficulties, is suffering, and the end is tranquility, it's not just a timeline. The first few years of their life, they had difficulty and then they had tranquility. It's cause and effect. The difficulties that they had earlier in their lives is what brought them to that tranquility that they had later on. That's what brought them to that place that they were able to enjoy that tranquility. The very purpose of those difficulties was to bring them to this place of tranquility and greatness at the end. Right? We all know, last week there was a lot of discussion about whether there's a medrash that says, I'm not sure which was the worst nisayon, Lech Lecha Me'artzecha or the Akedah, right? And the question is that clearly the Akedah was more difficult, right? And the Torah indicates. So there's answers on that, but that's a side point. But the idea is that at the end of that discussion is the Akedah was Avram's worst nisayon. That was his most difficult nisayon, right? And after he goes through that nisayon, he goes through 10 tests in his life, and he goes through this difficult nisayon. Then what does Hashem say to him? Right, he gives him all these brachas. I'm going to multiply your children. They'll conquer their enemies, which we should just say amen. We should see that bepoil very quickly. Every time he went through an nisayon and he accomplished, he earned more brachas. He became a kli for Hashem to give him more brachas. So we see this by Yosef Atzadik also, right? Yosef went through his brothers threw him into a pit to kill him. They sold him into slavery. He ends up in this home, and he has it good for a little bit there, and then the wife frames him. He goes to jail for 12 years. But what did that ultimately lead to? Straight from that prison, he became a king. He became the second in command. He became the king. It's not that, he went through this and then he became king. Because he went through this, he became the king. That was the process he needed to go through. That's why he earned becoming the king. Yosef is the only one of the 12 Shvatim that we count as one of the spheres, as we count, right? We have Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, and David. Yosef is the only one. That's what allowed him to become, and he corresponds to the midah of Yesod. That's what brought him to this. And now he ties it all together. And maybe we'll even finish a couple minutes early. So we ask, why is Sarah the only person in Jewish history that it says Kulan Shava L'Tova? We don't have it about anybody else that it says that all their years were good. There were other tzaddikim, tzidkaniyos, that you could have said this about. So he says that Dafka by Sarah Lalamid Shagidei Midas HaChesed Mamshichin Chesed. That this ties back to the midah of Chesed. Dihine Sarah Haisa Kamei Avram. Right? We mentioned before that Sarah went through all the nisyonis with Avram Avinu, but she also went through all the good stuff also. All of Avram's Chesed was also Sarah's Chesed. Right? When the Malachim came, who was cooking in the back? Avram was shechting, was serving the meat, but Sarah was making the challahs. Right? They were a partnership. The four corners of the tent were open, and he says here, he quotes, K'maimer Chazal, the Medrash tells us, Avram hoya megayer anoshim, v'Sarah megayeres anoshim. They had concurrent classes. Avram was giving shiurim to the men, and Sarah was giving shiurim to the women. It was a partnership. They were both all in on this chesed project. She'iska b'chesed yachad im Avram. She was his partner. V'im yishal ha'shoel harei kol chayim hayom leim tzar v'yisurim. So he'll ask, like we asked, one of the questions we asked, their lives were very difficult. How could you say that they were all good years? Al zeh oimeres haTorah, that's what the Torah is telling us. Shnei Chayei Sorah shekulun shavu l'toiva, they were all good. Why? Shekol hayisurim she'avru aleh, all of the difficulties and suffering that she went through. Hayu ba'atzas kel deos Hashem, was by design of Hashem. Hashem kel deos, who knows everything. L'havil l'tachlis shekulun shavu l'toiva, to bring her to the tachlis, that she could look back at the end of her life and say, it was all good. Why? Even those difficult years. I had that really bad year 12 years ago. But without that bad year, I couldn't have accomplished what I accomplished today. She was able to see that. Because Baruch was showing her that through chesed, showing us that through chesed you could see that. If your life is filled with chesed, if like we said before, that you do chesed every single day, then you'll see that. Then you'll be able to see that. You may not see it right away. It may take time. Look, Sarah for 90 years was not sure what was going on. For 90 years, she's watching everybody else building families, having everything they wanted, and she's not. But at the end, when she sees, through the power of chesed, she sees how she needed to go through that to be able to raise the Yitzchak, who's going to be able to marry Rivka and have Yaakov and build Klal Yisrael. She needed that. And she was only able to see that because of the chesed. Shal yodam higia l'si hatoiva. Through them, through the difficulties that she went through, she was able to reach the apex of good. Asher kol beis Yisrael oimid eleh. And the whole Klal Yisrael comes from that. All of us, every good deed in Klal Yisrael's history comes from that. This is what the Torah is coming to teach us. Shem adam oisik b'chesed. If a person is oisik in chesed, if you're engaged in chesed, like we said before, every day to find some chesed to do, muftach loy shemam shechesed atzmai. He's promised, he's guaranteed that chesed will come to him. Kavram v'Sarah she'isku b'chesed. V'al yidei zeh himshichu chesed shekulam sham l'toiva. And it'll draw chesed that will be able to look back and say, it was all chesed, it was all good. So one of the pshatim on Avram Zaken ba bayamim, right, is that a person could live 100 years, but, if he looks back and you say how many of those days were good days, maybe he has a few that he can point to. Avram Avinu was Zaken ba bayamim. He came with all of his days. Why? Because as we explained, every day was an opportunity for chesed. He was looking for ways to do chesed, to the point that if he didn't have an opportunity to do chesed, he was in pain. That's how Avram was blessed with everything. We said also, that was one of the questions we asked at the beginning also. Why is Avram the only personality in Tanakh that it says he had everything? No one else does it say he had everything. Avram had everything because he was able to look back at every day and say, that was a day that I produced something. I did chesed on that day. Every single day he did chesed. That's why he was blessed with everything. To complete bracha. It says that when Avram died, at the end of the parsha, Hashem blessed Yitzchak. It says that Hashem went to pay a shiva call. Hashem went to Yitzchak to pay a shiva call. We don't see anywhere else. That Hashem went to pay a shiva call. Nowhere else in Tanakh does it say that Hashem went to pay a shiva call. Because Avram was all chesed. So as we said before, when you do chesed, so Hashem's shadow does chesed also. And we know there's a famous idea, if there's one avel, if you ever go pay a shiva call, there's only one avel, right? It happens, there's only one avel. We don't change, I don't know if the Sfardim do, but by Ashkenazim, we don't change the nusach. You say Hamokim Minachem Eschem. Who's the Eschem if there's only one person sitting? Eschem is plural. We don't say oischa. We keep the same lashon. We say eschem. Why? Because the mace is there also. You're being menachem not just the avel, you're also being menachem the mace. So Hashem is Avram, who lived his whole life, every single day was chesed. Hashem says, I have to pay Avram the ultimate chesed. Right? We know that chesed with a mace is called chesed shalemes because there's no chance of getting reap. Hashem is, even after Avram dies, he's paying that chesed. Zeu inyan tenchumei avelim shu mimidas chesed. It comes from chesed. Umelamedes lanu haTorah kedosh parsha zu shekasher Yehudi oisa chesed. That's the lesson of this parsha. When a Jew does chesed, mamshech haydei ze chesed al atzmai. He brings chesed on himself. V'afim oivrim alav nisyonis v'yisurim ein ze stir lechesed. And even if difficult thing happened in a person's life, that he should not think that, what do you mean, I did all this chesed, and now something difficult is going on in my life. Why should I have to go through that? I looked up how to pronounce this word. Because all that is also chesed. Because Hashem is bringing us to our ultimate goal. Hashem blesses, and Hashem wants to bless each of us towards the end of our lives, which should be many, many years. But 120, Hashem wants to say, I blessed him bakol, I blessed him bakol. So we'll just, because we've been doing it for the last few weeks, just tie this in. I mean, the outpouring of chesed really doesn't need a tie-in. It's very clear the way, the second that Jews heard on October 7th, the second, wherever you were, whether you were in Eretz Yisrael, whether you were in New York, wherever you were, the immediate reaction of a Jew was chesed. What can I do? What could we do? What could we do? We didn't know the people. People didn't know who they were sending things to. People. I mean, we were in Eretz Yisrael. We were fortunate to be in Eretz Yisrael, and Matzah Yontif, people were like going through their closets, finding like packaged socks and underwears to send to soldiers. Nobody had any idea if they even needed it. Right? There wasn't Rahmanis. There wasn't reacting to, I know he needs this, therefore. But people were saying, soldiers always could use socks and underwear, right? So people were like, it was just, that's that outpouring of chesed that we got from Avraham Avinu. Mitzvah Hashem, we should all be zocheh to see that chesed be repaid many times, and we should see an end to this situation with Mashiach b'mher b'yameinu.